It all began one quiet morning when billionaire Richard Wallace stepped out onto the marble balcony of his mansion, coffee in hand, and noticed something unusual. His housekeeper, Mariah, the woman who had worked for him for 5 years, was leaving early, her 2 young children walking beside her, wearing worn-out shoes and faded backpacks. He had never even realized she had kids. Something inside him stirred, a curiosity he hadn't felt in years. For a man used to running empires, following anyone was beneath him, yet that day, he couldn't help it. He got in his car and followed her from a distance. As he drove through the city, the streets changed from polished neighborhoods to cracked pavements and aging buildings. The farther they went, the smaller everything became. Mariah stopped in front of a rundown apartment complex, guiding her children inside with a gentle smile that didn't match the tiredness in her eyes. Richard stayed in his car, watching in silence. How could a woman who worked in his mansion live like this? He'd seen her every day, always polite, always cheerful, but he'd never once asked about her life. He waited a few minutes before stepping out, pretending to be passing by. He heard laughter, soft, genuine laughter, from inside that old building. Mariah and her kids were sitting on the floor, eating sandwiches together, no fancy furniture, no comfort, yet the room was filled with warmth. And for the first time in years, Richard felt something break inside him. He realized how empty his own mansion was compared to this small home full of love. He quietly returned to his car, unsure of what to feel, but one thought echoed in his mind: how could someone with so little give so much warmth? That night, Richard couldn't sleep. The image of Mariah's children, smiling, even when they had almost nothing, haunted him. He'd spent his life chasing numbers, deals, and luxury, but he'd never known that kind of peace. Next morning, he arrived at the mansion early, pretending everything was normal. Mariah greeted him the same way she always did, humble, kind, unaware that her boss had followed her the day before. He tried to talk to her. "Mariah, do your children go to school?" he asked casually. She hesitated, then smiled. "They do, sir. I do my best. It's not easy, but they're good kids. They know we don't have much, but we have each other." Her voice trembled slightly, but her eyes held pride. Richard nodded, feeling a lump rise in his throat. Over the next few days, he started noticing the small details: how she skipped lunch to save money, how her hands were rough from work, how she never complained even when she was clearly exhausted. One afternoon, he found an envelope she had accidentally left behind in the kitchen. It was a school fee notice, overdue. He stood there staring at it, the words blurring in front of his eyes. He could pay that amount 100 times over without noticing it, yet this woman was fighting just to give her children an education. That evening, he made a quiet decision. Without telling her, he contacted the school and cleared all pending dues, along with 2 years of future tuition. He asked them to keep his name confidential. When Mariah received the letter saying her children's school fees had been fully covered, she fell silent. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "Thank you, God." She never knew who did it, but Richard watched from his office window as she walked to work the next day, smiling with renewed hope. For the first time, he realized that helping someone didn't take away from him, it filled the emptiness he'd carried for years. Weeks passed, and something inside Richard changed. He started joining his staff for meals, asking about their families, listening instead of commanding. The mansion no longer felt like a fortress, it became a place of shared humanity. But one cold morning, Mariah didn't show up for work. Hours turned into a full day. Concerned, he drove back to that small apartment he once followed her to. When he knocked on the door, one of her children opened it, eyes swollen from crying. "Mom's sick," the little girl said softly. She didn't want to bother anyone. Richard stepped inside and saw Mariah lying on a small couch, pale but still trying to smile. "I'm fine, sir," she whispered. She wasn't. She had been hiding her illness for months, afraid of losing her job. Richard's chest tightened. Without hesitation, he called a doctor, paid for her treatment, and made sure her children were cared for. When she woke up days later in a private hospital room, she saw him sitting by her side, a look of quiet remorse on his face. "I should have noticed sooner," he said, his voice cracking. "You've done more for me than you realize. You reminded me what kindness looks like." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "Didn't have to, sir," she whispered, "but thank you." When she finally returned to work, she found the mansion transformed. Richard had set up a small learning center for the children of his staff, free of charge. Mariah's kids were the first to enroll. The billionaire who once lived surrounded by silence now found himself surrounded by laughter and gratitude. As the sun set that evening, Richard stood by the same balcony where it all began. He looked at Mariah helping her kids with homework, their laughter echoing through the halls. The first time in a long time, he smiled, not the empty smile of wealth, but the warm smile of a man who had finally found the richest thing in life: humanity.